So what we're going to do is we're going to set up our folder structure on the computers, set up our preferences, get into Maya, and start working. So you guys are the only ones from the other class. So the stuff on your computers, you don't have to delete your preferences. You guys don't, but you could if you wanted to, okay? It all depends. It's going to be pretty much the same ones, but adding other stuff in there. Okay, so on your computer, you have a C drive, you have a desktop. We will never save anything to the desktop or save anything to the C drive. If the computer were to crash or you rebooted it, everything that's on the desktop or C drive gets wiped, okay? So don't save anything to either one of those. Your area to save stuff is the P drive, so that's where you will be creating your main folder. Yeah, it's just you guys. All right, so make a new folder on the P drive, call it your last name 2540 F18. I'll say it again when you get back up. Okay, so this folder is going to be your folder. All your stuff is going to go into here. If you do have any other MACA classes, I recommend kind of making sure your stuff is organized, not only by obviously your name, but also class and semester. That will help you stay organized. Hit your button. All right, inside that folder, we need to do nothing, okay? If you remember from cinema class, basically every time you made a project, you would have to make the project folder, make all the subfolders in there. You don't have to do that for Maya. Maya will automatically create our folder structure for us, okay? So we just need to create the initial folder. Maya will do the rest of that for us. On the P drive, so jump back to your P drive, you should have a Maya folder on the P drive. You may have it, you may not have it. If Maya was booted on your computer, you have it. If it wasn't, then you don't, okay? The Maya folder is all the Maya preferences. So when we come into Maya, we open it up for the first time, it creates this whole folder structure for us to be able to save all of our preferences. Typically, the way people work in the industry is that they will take this folder everywhere they go. So if I'm working on this computer today, I have that folder. If I go to Austin's computer tomorrow, I can bring my folder and all my preferences will go with it. Literally, the entire interface will go. It's kind of like the Adobe Cloud will let you do that. This will let you do that too. Okay? We want to wipe it though because we want to start with a fresh set of preferences. So on the 2018 folder, you can delete that 2018 folder. And right in your P drive. The P drive, yes. I'm going into Documents because that's where mine is located. Yours is going to be right in the P drive inside Maya.
So just delete the file that says 2018?
Correct.
This won't affect the preferences or anything?
Well, you would save yours for the other one too. So you don't have to delete yours because you're in the other class. It's going to have this basically the same preferences plus some on top. So however you want to do it.
Okay, so I should leave mine how it is?
Yes.
Okay.
You had your head down. I forgot you were in this class too.
Wow, all right, I exist.
You do exist, but you had your head down, so you didn't exist then. All right, you got the 2018 deleted?
Okay. All right, just making sure.
Yep. And what will happen is when Maya reboots or when we boot it up, it'll just create that folder. Okay, and then go to your P drive and then right on the main P drive. Maybe. Oh, you are. Open up or click on computer, go to P drive.
Okay.
And then here you'll make that new folder with your last name, 2540 F18. All right. So once you have your preferences deleted, you can go ahead and open up Maya. The more time you spend in this program, the easier it's going to get. One of the complaints with Maya is that it has a very steep learning curve, meaning you have to learn a whole bunch of stuff before you can actually do anything with it, okay? Once you do, though, typically people have a hard time going anywhere else because of how intuitive Maya's interface actually is. I didn't delete mine.
There was this new modeling software my friend showed me on Facebook that's like in like beta or whatever that I tried out.
wasn't ZBrush, right?
What was it called?
It was called like the B-Roid Studio, whatever it was. It was for like anime characters. I was like, oh, this would be fun to start off with, and just like I wanted to get it and play around with it. And yeah.
All right, so when you open up Maya for the first time, this is what you get. It says, what's new, highlight settings. So a few of you were in here last semester for modeling class. The same stuff is new that was new last time. So it's up to you whether you want to keep it highlighted or not. You can just say show this at startup or turn that off if you don't want that. It's a different language, look at that. Cool. We're going to set up a custom shelf. This is basically an area where all of your main tools can be, okay? So anytime you're doing something inside of Cinema, you would have an area where, you know, you keep going to the same tools over and over again. The shelves up top is where you can set all that stuff up. So I'm going to go to the custom shelf. You're going to use the same shelf, but I'm going to add, I may add some stuff to it, okay? I'll see which ones I may want to add. So we're going to add a couple things. So the way it works is you hold down Control and Shift on your keyboard, and then you can add those things to your shelf. So I'm going to go to Edit, Delete by Type, History. And all you have to do is just click on it or release your mouse on Edit, Delete by Type, History with Control and Shift held down. Once you do that, don't click it 6 times. Click off, and then you'll see it should have a little icon right inside the shelf area, right there. Okay? I don't think you're holding on Control Shift, Sam, because your other hand was on your knee. So unless you have another hand, I can't see. There you go. And nothing magical happens. It just ends up in your shelf. So just click off, and then you should see it. Yep, there it is. Cool. All right, so now we're going to go to Control Shift and then go to Modify Center Pivot. And then we'll also go to Modify Freeze Transforms. And under Window, we'll go to Outliner. We'll go to the Play Blast option box. On the far right of Play Blast under Window, you'll see there's an option box. So hold Control Shift and click on that option box. Right there. So under Window, yep, just click on the square at the end of it. And then Animation Editors, still under Window, we'll add the Graph Editor and the Dope Sheet and the Expression Editor. Yep, Graph Editor, Dope Sheet, Expression Editor. Okay, under General Editors, we'll add the Attribute Editor. General. And add the Attribute Editor. And then under regular windows, we'll add the Node Editor. If you didn't have it before, then it is. It should say that icon. The Node Editor, right under Windows, Node Editor. Okay. Now, at any point, you can add other things. So as you start getting comfortable with the software and more familiar with it, then you can say, oh, I'm constantly going to this menu. I'm going to add it to my shelf. Okay. That 2018 folder that we deleted should be regenerated now. When you leave today, you'll back that folder up. When you come in tomorrow, you'll put it back on the drive. When you leave, you'll take it off. When you come back in, you'll put it back on, okay? So every day you will make sure you're keeping that organized. I would also recommend backing it up somewhere else. Sometimes you forget, you've moved it, it's gone, everything's disappeared. You want to make sure it's saved, okay? We're going to go to File and then say Save Preferences. And what that does, saves your preferences. These are preferences that we just set up, it saves them. All right, we're going to do the running guy getting chased by a gear right there at the bottom corner. It is a guy running away from a gear. Let's start at the top and we'll work our way toward the bottom. I turned off highlighting new stuff. This is where you could turn it on again if you want to, where that green is. You could also change the color if you want. You can change whether the mouse is a scroll wheel. That's something you could do. You could change your interface settings. The reason you would use this area, if you had a 4K screen, basically your entire My interface becomes like super tiny, like you can barely read anything. That's where you could scale it up so that it's obviously more readable. You can page through those if you want to. Under UI elements, if something gets turned off, like your shelf or like your command line or whatever, this is where you can turn it back on. Okay? And everything here is movable. You can take anything and just move it to like another screen if you want to, or whatever, however you want to keep it organized. We're going to scoot down to settings. And I'm going to point out that we have centimeters inside of Maya. So everything that we do is based on centimeters. So if we were to try to create something dynamic, and we had a very tiny scene, it's going to move completely different than if we have a huge scene and have dynamics in there. Okay? For regular animation, it's not going to be a huge issue. For rendering with lighting and stuff, it will be a huge issue. Okay? So you have to tweak it some. So just keep in mind that we're in centimeters. So when we create a bouncing ball in animation world, that bouncing ball could be this big, like in the palm of my hand, or it could be the size of a car. We just have to be aware of that as we're doing it. It's a little bit more stylized in this class. If you took the rendering class, we're trying to get a little bit more realistic. So we try to model things more accurately sized. And here, we can be a little bit more fluid with it, okay? Also, we have our time is 24 frames a second. We're going to change this to 30 frames per second. And the reason we do that, it gives us an extra 6 frames per second to play with. So if we're really trying to get an animation and add some detail to it, it just allows a couple more frames in there. What else? Animation is fine. There are some extra things inside the animation menu. At some point, we may need to pop into these. It really depends on how the computers are feeling by the time we get to that point. You've had After Effects before, right? Most of you have had After Effects, okay? In After Effects, you make a keyframe. The default keyframe is what kind? A diamond, which means linear, okay? Basically just like a straight shot. Maya's defaults are set to spline, which are automatically eased in and eased out, okay? So you can change that here if you wanted just flat or just stepped or something else. You'll see what those mean, but you can change that. I'm leaving it defaulted, okay? Correct. It can be. Right. Yeah, it's fine. Regardless, just like After Effects, we're going to have to play with the tangents and play with them, so we'll just get used to it. Yep. Selection priority. So let's jump down to selection real quick. Modeling is not a huge issue because basically we're dealing a lot with just geometry. But when we're dealing with animation, we're going to be dealing with a lot of different levels of selection. Okay, so if we model the character's body, we may have the arm, we may have joints in the middle of it, we may have handles that we're using to select the joints and select different things. This area is where where Maya knows what has selection priority. What that means is if I were to marquee everything in my scene, what's the number one thing Maya is going to select? Okay, so that's where this comes in. You don't need to change anything, but I just want you to be aware of it, that there is a selection priority. It won't select everything, it'll just select like the top things first and then so on down the list. Don't need to worry about that, don't need to worry about that. Go down to your time slider. You'll see that our playback start is at 1.25. When we changed it from 24 frames a second to 30, it does that. So just set this back to 1, set the other one back to 1. You do get a stupid error on the bottom when you do that, just ignore the error. A couple things to point out here. If you watch tutorials online, there's a lot of cool things that Maya's implemented. We won't be really getting into them just because it's just like another thing that I could add on top of the already complex stuff we're going to be going through. One of them is the grease pencil. So if you were trying to kind of draw out what your animation would look like, you could actually use the time slider and you could actually draw out your animation frame by frame inside here. It's really neat, especially if you had an art director and they're going to show you like, oh, this should sweep here more and this should do this more. You can draw right in the interface. We're not going to use that, but it's there. This grease pencil frame, that's where you could change the settings. So if you did want to do something like that, that's where you would do it. Also the key ticks. It's going to really depend if you have a bigger screen and higher resolution, but whenever you set a keyframe in here, you'll get a red line, okay? When you get that red line, it may be super thin, you can't see it. So you can change the key tick size right there if you want that to be thicker. It's an option. I don't touch it, I leave it alone. It's an option. Playback speed. We want to make sure we are playing every frame, so we will make sure it's on play every frame. Now what that may mean is that we're not in real time, so that's fine. We'll just make a note of it. Go to the undo area. Maya has a limited amount of undos, or an unlimited amount. However you want to lay it out, you could have 1,000,000 undos, you could have 6 undos, okay? It depends on how wild you want to get. Right now the undo queue is on. Sometimes this automatically gets turned off. I don't know how it does, it just does it to screw with you. I recommend at most 300 undos. Don't set this to infinite. Every time you select something and deselect, that's another undo. And that's another piece of memory that's saved into the computer. So I would say if you want to, you can set the undo queue to 300. I'm going to leave mine at 50. Okay? And all that means is you can hit undo that many times before, you know, it stops. Everything else in here should be fine. Oops, I forgot one area. Files and projects. So if you go to Files and Projects, Maya has an autosave. So if you're worried about Maya crashing, which it will crash, Maya crashes more than Cinema does, this is where you can set up autosave. So you could say, enable autosave, and then save my project every 10 minutes. And what that means is that every 10 minutes you'll get a pop-up that says this is a student version, you hit continue, and it automatically saves your work. It will create a brand new folder. Inside that folder, it'll put all of the autosave things, okay? So if you're concerned about having to redo your work, or you're one that doesn't like to save your stuff when you should, then do that. I don't like to have it on, so I don't. All right, that's all. So I can hit save there. And then I can hit file, and then save preferences again. All right, so this is the Maya interface. This over here is your views. So if you wanted to, right now we're in a single perspective view. You can change it to 4, you can change it to 2, you can add the outliner on the left side of it. The outliner is a lot like your objects inside of Cinema, where it lists all the objects that are inside your scene. Except over here, all we do is organize them. We don't, like in Cinema, we would have tags, we'd drop materials on them over there. You don't do that with this one. It's simply just for organizing. So you will use the outliner a lot, just in a different way. If you want to be in this view, let me jump back to my 4 view. If you want to be in this view and then swap to like the 4 views, you can tap the space bar, and that will let you switch between the different views. So just do that for a second just so you can see that it does definitely work. It's gorgeous, right? Yes, they'll carry over. They'll be the same. Right. Yeah, and some people who do work in the industry like that, they would have, let's say, custom shelf number 1, custom shelf number 2, custom shelf number 3. Like they would have several custom shelves and even different interfaces. So all of these that I'm showing, these are just the default ones. You can make your own layout and customize it and save that information. Under panels here, just so you can see this, here are some saved layouts. So if I'm doing camera sequencing, I may want that layout, okay? And this is basically like I want to move from one camera to another camera to another camera, how you can do that. Here is the hypergraph. I'll change that, okay? So yeah, you can really customize Maya's interface like a whole lot. At one point, and they must have been a glitch, but you could actually have like a floating, this is the only one thing you can't do, a floating viewport, which was awesome. And basically like the outliner would rip off, and then you could change this to perspective. You can't do that anymore, but it used to allow you to do that. Okay, so they just nest right back in there like you've seen before. Okay, up top, these are all the different menus that are inside Maya. Unlike other softwares that you may have used, Maya does not have just one menu on the top. It has several menus on the top. So this is right now the modeling menu. If you look on the far left, you'll see where it says modeling. You can change that to rigging. You can change that to animation. You can change that to effects or rendering, or you could even customize it and create your own menu set that has all the stuff in there that you would want. Okay. A lot of this, again, you won't really need to play with until you get to the point where it's like, okay, I'm getting more comfortable with the software. I want to create my own menus and stuff. All of these things open up. So you see the little triangles here? Those little triangles open up, and then they can also collapse. If you have a laptop, sometimes they all don't fit because they're all a specific size, and so you have to condense them or expand them. You'll see on here as I expand these, they all don't fit. I lost a couple of them out there. So I don't really need that one. Get rid of that one. Yep, that's good. Okay. There are buttons all over the place. So here's some buttons on this side. This is a button, obviously, to lock or disable docking and undocking. So I guess you can't pull stuff off. Over here on the side, these are the channel box and layer editor, the modeling toolkit, and the attribute editor. So more stuff is on that side. You'll find there's stuff kind of nested all around the interface. So don't be afraid if something happens. There's always a way to just reset that workspace back to the default, okay? So if you freak out, don't worry about it. There's a channel box. We'll get to that, but that's basically where we can see things like translates, rotates, and scales. There is a layer editor. So just like Cinema, you can organize stuff through layers. Maya's is a little bit neater in how it organizes stuff. There's a timeline. There's a work area. And here's our frames per second, and that's pretty much the interface, okay? It gets much more in depth, but in a nutshell, that's it. We're going to be doing a simple animation to start. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into a side view. So I'm going to hold down the space bar here, hold down the left mouse button, and change this to the right view, right at the center of that Maya logo. Or bottom. There you go. Okay. So hold the space bar, hold the left mouse button right on Maya, and go to right. Yep, right there. You holding the mouse button? The left one? Yep. Let go of it. Okay, just hold the space bar. Okay, now hold the left mouse. It doesn't like you.
Yeah, exactly. Things don't like you today.
All right, so we'll just tap and then go to the right side. Okay. If that doesn't work, I don't know why his wasn't working. You can simply just tap. Oops, mine's not working. I got it. There you go. So you just tap the space bar, go to the side view. Okay, that works also. The only reason I don't like to do that is because it refreshes all my views. So it, like, in this case, not doing anything, but if I had stuff in the scene, it wouldn't. It would take longer. I'm going to go to Create Polygons and make a cube. So make sure you go to Create Polygons and make a cube. All right, so what I need to do now is we need to move this cube so that it's on the ground. It doesn't matter to animation physically where this cube is at. It just matters to someone with OCD about where the cube is at. So where that ground is, the cube needs to sit on top of it, okay? So if I were to move the cube up in the Y direction, see how this area has stuff now? If I move it up 0.5, there we go, you'll see how it sits nicely right on the ground, okay? We don't want to eyeball it. We want to type in 0.5 in the translate Y so that he is sitting right there at the origin. All right, now if you remember from your cinema stuff, you had Alt left mouse button that allowed you to like tumble around the scene, kind of like orbiting. You had Alt right mouse button that lets you zoom in and out, and Alt middle mouse button does that. So at least you have that kind of connection between the two softwares. The hotkeys for move, rotate, and scale, though, are different. You'll see on your hotkey sheet, the move key is W. That was not the hotkey inside of Cinema. E is rotate, and R is scale. Okay? So just to screw with you, that's what they are. So we're going to rotate, and what I want to do is I want to take this cube, and I want to rotate the cube just like this. Okay, so we did this in After Effects class, right? When I rotate the cube. So if I rotated the cube now, is it rotating like I want it to? No. Okay, what's it doing? Right, so it's spinning around the center. I want to spin on that bottom corner, okay? So we're going to learn a couple hotkeys. They're on the list. You can definitely reference them if you'd like. Hotkey number 1 is D. Okay, so I'm going to hold down the D key. This is get me into pivot mode. All right, that's what that means. Maya is very visual, and what you're seeing means something. It's not just like, you know, I guess that's how it is. When it looks like this, I have arrows, I have this square and circle. That means I'm in pivot mode. Okay, so if I hold D, that's what that means. Now I want to snap this right to the bottom right corner of that box, so I'm going to hold down V as well. I haven't moved anything yet. I'm just holding down D and V. Okay, D is for pivot, V stands for snapping to point. Now notice the icon at the center of this when I toggle between V and no V. Okay, there's V, there's no V. Do you see the difference? Yes, okay. So anytime we have snapping on, any kind of snapping, we'll see that circle in the middle, okay? So now all I'm going to do is not click on the circle here, not click on any of these. I'm going to try to get the cursor right in the corner there, and then drag that over. And that should snap right to that corner, okay? You could also probably grab this red. Yep, you can probably also grab that corner there. Okay, so hold down D, hold down V, and then grab that manipulator and drag it to the corner. That there. Now you want to grab this, or you want to grab this circle right in the middle. Good? Everyone good? No? Which corner you put it on? It just matters of how you want to animate this. So if I put it on this corner here, I'm most likely going to rotate it this way because that's the pivot area. If I put it on this corner, then I would rotate it that way. Okay? So it doesn't matter to me how you have that set up, but that's what it's going to be doing. All right, so what we want to do is animate this thing just going whichever direction. So we need to set keyframes. In After Effects, you would go through and you would turn on the stopwatch for whatever you're rotating and then just rotate it, right? In Cinema, you had the XYZ. You can specify which one by clicking the dot. In Maya, there's several different ways to do it. One of the ways, we're not going to do this. We're going to hit S, okay? We're not doing that way. You would hit S. Now what S will do is it'll set keyframes for everything that's inside your channel box. So every time that we would set a key, we would get at least 10 keyframes up at the top and then all the keyframes on the bottom. when we go and look at our graphs, we would see this graph editor full of stuff that we're not even using. So we really want to be specific about what we're isolating to set keyframes on. So I'm going to hold down Shift and I'm going to hit E. Okay, what is our hotkey for rotating? E. So if I hold down Shift and hit E, that sets keyframes just on rotate. Okay? If you look at your channel box, you'll see rotate XYZ. What color are they? All of yours are red? You hit S. So you have to hit undo now and then wait for those to go away, then hit Shift E. Okay, now notice that they are a bright, vibrant red, right? Don't do the next part. I'm just going to advance a frame. Now look at the color. They're a lighter red or a pink. Okay, so you see there's a difference between when I'm actually on a keyframe versus off of a keyframe, right? So that's, again, something to kind of pay attention to, because as I'm tweaking things, I may need to get right on top of the keyframe and override it versus I'm off one, right? In this case, it's very difficult to do that because we only have 150 frames. When you have 2,000 frames and you're trying to get to frame 342, it's difficult to kind of get it right on top of there, okay? So now what I want to do is rotate it up. So I'm going to grab just the red. In my case, it's red. Yours might be blue or green. It shouldn't be green. Might be green. I'm going to grab the red and just start rotating it in the direction that I want this to go. Okay? So I'm going to rotate it over there. So how does that look? Just enough to drive everyone in the world crazy, right? I did do that on purpose. Okay? Whenever we animate something, and this is going to sound weird, but we want to be pretty exact with it. I know animation is kind of like this fluid thing, nothing's really exact, but when we do something like this, we want it to be exact because it'll make it look better. When we do a walk cycle, we want feet to look like they're hitting the ground, so we need those to be exact. What happens outside of that is different, but typically there are certain things we want to be exact. This is one of those. So we need to do some math because I'm sure you guys have forgotten all of your mathematics. So how many degrees are in a circle? 360. Look at that. You guys are on target. All right, 360 degrees. So what's half of that? 180. Nice. Half? 90. Half? 45. Half? 22.5. That's a 5. And that's a point. That's a 5. Cool. All right, that's typically as far as we need to go. You can go further, 11.25, right, if you needed to. 7.5. How dare you, sir? All right, so what we're going to do, we're going to type in -90 over there. That way, or 90. Whichever direction is where yours is at, that's what you would type in. So mine, -90 is putting it perfectly in that spot. On yours, because I'm not at your station, +90 might be it for some reason. Okay, I don't know. So I always rotate it first to see which direction it's going, and then I look at that and say, okay, it's only the one, it's this way, it's almost at -90, I'll put it at -90. Now pay attention to this too. If I were to have not clicked right on that and I just started dragging here, look what happens, okay? Now all my numbers are going crazy, I can't tell which one I'm supposed to be changing, blah, blah, blah. There's so much stuff going on, so I'm going to hit undo. All right, so can we set our next keyframe? Okay, so jump forward. How many frames? I don't know. How many do I want? We don't know, right? So how many frames are in a second? 60. No, 30. Okay, so let's count this. 1, 2, right? So it's like 2 seconds for that. That's like too long. So maybe like 1. That seems like a good amount of time to start, right? Lower it probably. It'll probably end up being 20 frames, but let's start at 30. So if we go to 30, what happened to our cube? It went back, right? Yep. So just like After Effects, or just like Cinema, if we don't set that key or adjust the time first, it will automatically jump back to the original value. But we already know which area we're changing it to, and we already know the value, so all we have to do is go up to our rotate X and type in -90. You can't hit Shift E again. Look what happens when I hit Shift E. It does that. After I hit Enter, not Enter. Maya has two, or the keyboard has two enters, right? There's one on the numeric keypad, and there's one on the regular keyboard. Those do two different things. So, and it's, I said Maya has a learning curve. It's like stupid, but then it's like, oh, okay, I get it. Okay, so if I type in -90 and I hit Enter on my numeric keypad, do you see how it's still kind of like flashing? If I hit Enter on the other keypad, it says you're accepting this value. Now I can hit Shift E, and then everything is cool. Okay? Correct. Okay. Just rotate. Okay. And then we can obviously verify that. How? How do we know that we set a keyframe? Red line and bright red. Right. So the bright red and the rotates, the red line in my time slider. Right? So now if we were to hit play, the hotkey is Alt-V, because why would it be the same as every other program? It's not supposed to be that fast, is it? No. Okay. Do you remember what we set inside of the preferences for how fast to play this back? No, we didn't. We said play every frame. Yep. So we told it to play every frame, meaning it's going to play as fast as it can. We don't want that. So we're going to right-click. We're going to go to, in the time slider, sorry, go to Playback Speed, and then say play every frame maximum real time. Okay, and so what that's going to do is it's going to play it back as fast as it can, or as all the frames, but in real time. Now, we don't know if this is actually going in real time. If each one of our frames, let's say it took Maya a second to calculate each one of our frames, it's only going to play back one frame a second, okay? That's not real time. We don't know if this is actually going in real time yet. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a little interface item right here that will tell us how fast we're actually playing back. That way we have at least some idea how close we are. It'll never be perfect. It'll never always say 30. Usually it'll say like 29, 31 kind of thing. It kind of bounces around a little bit, but it'll be close. All right. Under display, heads up display, I'm going to turn on frame rate. Okay, so now when I hit play, you'll see that it says 30, 30.1, 29.9, right, way down here. So now I have an idea that I'm playing at about real time. And I think that's probably close enough for what we're doing that it's sufficient, okay? If you had a character moving, literally it may take a second or a half a second for it to calculate one arm position to another arm position to another arm position. So it may go super slow. No, it's just computers. I'm sure there is a reason for it. Yeah. All right, so there's our animation, right? Gorgeous. All right, so we have, like we talked about, this is automatically easing in and easing out. If we hit play, you can kind of see it there, okay? But it still doesn't look right, to me at least. So we want to tweak the curves for this. After Effects has speed graphs, right? So you can grab that and say go fast, go slow, whatever. Maya does not have a speed graph. Maya, you got to suck it up and put your big boy pants on and just get into the value graph and learn it, okay? So under GE, which is your graph editor, you're going to click that one. And unlike After Effects, it pops out. Like, this is amazing. You can make it bigger. You can make it smaller. You can put it on the other screen if you want to. Which attribute did we animate? Rotate X, right? So we still see Rotate Y. We still see Rotate Z in here. We didn't do anything to them. Right now, they're just getting in the way. okay? I left those there just so you can see what it looks like to have other stuff in the scene, and then obviously how we can grab these graphs. So I'm just marking these flat ones and hitting delete to get rid of them, okay? So those two flat ones, marquee like a little line in the middle of them, and then hit delete. Make sure you don't accidentally grab the red one, because that's the one we need. Okay, so this is our rotate X. Now this looks like, I don't know, if I was to look at a speed graph, this looks completely different, right? Because a speed graph is basically, it's just like a hill, and then we would push that hill to one side or push the hill to the other side. So in here, we have this. So we have to consider what this is actually doing. This is the rotate. So at the start of this, it's moving very slowly, then it's speeding up, and then it's moving very slowly again. Anytime you see a more horizontal area, okay, so like this spot here, this is the same zoom as your Maya, by the way. This area here, and I've zoomed in just so you can see it, anytime you see anything that's more horizontal, that's very little movement, okay? So anytime, if you just kind of mentally make a note of that. Anytime you see anything that has a lot of vertical movement, that's very fast, okay? So at the very beginning, this is pretty horizontal, so it's slow. In the middle, it's pretty vertical, it's fast, and at the end, it's slow again, okay? So what we're going to do is we want to like really enhance this, exaggerate it a bit. So it goes really fast at the start of this. Well, it starts off slow and then picks up speed and then goes really fast right at the end. Okay? So I'm going to grab this handle here. And again, it's one of those things like the two enter keys. I marquee the keyframe at the end. I marquee this handle. I make sure I hit W to get into the move tool, and then I middle mouse button drag upwards. It's confusing. Okay, so take a second to try to process what I just said. You marquee the point, you marquee the handle, make sure you're in the move tool, and then you middle mouse button drag it up. Try not to drag it past that line. You want to have a nice hill starting at the top and then coming straight down. Straight-ish down. Okay, I'm going to toss this off onto the bottom of my screen. I'm going to hit play. Okay, and then you can look at that animation and just see what the animation looks like. Okay, does it feel better? It's a little bit better, right? A tiny bit, right? So we can make it even better because when we deal with keyframes, we have to deal with two things. One of them is the space between our keyframes. The other thing is how they're interpreting the space between the keyframes, okay? So what I mean by that is we have two keyframes. One is at 1 frame, one is at 30. That space is 1 second. Regardless of what we do inside the graph editor, it's still going to take 1 second for this box to flip over, okay? So whether I make it go super slow at the beginning and then super fast at the end or whatever, it's still going to take 1 second to get there. So I may want to take these keyframes and bring them closer together. That will make the box feel a little bit more impactful. I'll get more of an oomph with that, okay? I said it will probably be at about 20. I think it'll probably be about 20. It may be 15. So we could do it inside here. If I grab this keyframe, I can slide that keyframe over, but we're not going to do it there, okay? I want to show you the other tool that I typically like to use for that. That's called the dope sheet. So if you look up in your shelf, you'll see the DS dope sheet. And if you're a fan of Excel, you'll be really excited about this. Okay, so this looks pretty much like a spreadsheet with your keyframes. So right here at the very beginning, this is keyframe number 1. At the very end, this is keyframe number 2. There's 2 spots for it. That top one that's blue, that's like your master. So if I were to have 25 items selected, that master one would allow me just to click that and grab everything below it. Okay? So I'm trying to line things up, that's where I could use. We only have 1 item, so it doesn't matter if I grab the top or the bottom. But what I'm going to do is, looking down here, I can see this is frame 20. I'm going to middle drag and move this keyframe to about frame 20. Okay, make sure you're in the move tool. Usually people forget to be in the move tool. Click on it so it's yellow, and then middle drag it so it's at about frame 20. Make sure you have your cube selected. What? Okay. It's a little bit faster. Yeah. Let's squeeze it even further. So let's go instead of 20. Let's take it to like 13. There we go. Sure. Now something to also pay attention to. As we were tweaking it in the dope sheet, in the graph editor, that curve was pretty much staying the same that it was. Sort of. My curve used to be pretty drastic. Now it's pretty tame, right? This used to go pretty much straight up, and I had a nice like rounding there. Now it's like doing something very similar. So just because I tweak the one area doesn't mean I don't have to come back here and tweak this. So I go back and tweak that in the graph editor, and then there we go. So 13 seems like a good value. I like that. Okay, so now it feels a little bit more impactful. So I had to tweak the spacing that this keyframe and this keyframe are at, and then I had to adjust the tangent between them to get this to look correct. Okay? Every time you do this kind of stuff, you have to do that. This is glorious. We should save our work at some point, right? Let's do that now. I'm going to close my dope sheet. I'm going to close my graph editor. We don't want to just hit Control S to save, because Control S to save has no destination. We haven't told it where to go. We haven't created our project folder to keep us organized. So we're going to go to File, and we're going to go to Project Window. We're going to click New, and we're going to give this a name. Put your name, and then put underscore playing around, or playing. For the location, pick your folder on the P drive. Alright, so every project that we do, we'll come to Project Window, we'll give it a name with our name inside, and then we'll take the location and make sure it's set to our 2540 folder on the P drive, right? All the stuff that you see underneath that area, those are all the folders Maya is going to create for us. So where it says scenes, we want to make sure that all of our scenes, which is our Maya files, go into that folder, okay? Maya wants them in there. You can ignore the templates for now. Any of the images that we render out, Maya will automatically put inside the images folder. Anything that we bring into Maya, Maya wants inside the source images folder. So we'll make sure if we bring a picture of a dog, we put it inside the source images folder. And then the rest of this stuff you can pretty much ignore. There is an autosave, so that in case you needed to retrieve an autosave, that's where it'll be located. If any of your folders get deleted, Maya will recreate the folder, but it will not put the stuff back in there. If you delete your scenes folder, it's gone. Maya will not just recreate all your scenes for you. Okay, so there's that. Hit accept. And now you can hit Control S to save. Make sure it goes into your scenes folder, so you may need to go into the folder and go into scenes. And then call it your last name, playing around underscore 001. I just went into perspective just to show. Oh, your last name underscore playing around underscore 001. Okay. Yes, sir. When we set keyframes, so I said there's several ways, right? So S sets keyframes for everything. Shift E sets it for just the rotates. We can also right-click on any item and go to key selected. And that's typically the way that we're going to do it initially. I will show you other ways as we get further into it where we can use the S key and it limits us to just what we have selected. Okay. Maya also does have an auto key, which is that button there, which is like After Effects. You don't want to use it because once you start setting keyframes, you start moving stuff, it starts to go very crazy. Okay. So we're just going to leave that. Now this is an annoying thing that we have to do. I'm in perspective just so you can see what it looks like in perspective. When I hit play, I see the thing fall over, but then I have to wait all the way until it gets to the end, and then I see it again. So, do you see anything that would allow me to kind of isolate that area? Yes, sir?
The gray bar.
Right there, right? Yep. So you just grab that gray bar, and you just isolate what it is we want to focus on, and then leave a little bit of room. Don't try to get it from 1 to 13 exactly. Go to 1 to like 15 or 20, or not 15, but 20 or something.
25 probably.
Yeah, 25 does seem like a good number. That way we still have time to kind of reflect on that. As you look at your animations, you will find that you kind of brainwash yourself into not seeing any of your errors. Sometimes that will happen. You've looked at it so long that everything just kind of like smudges together. Sometimes you do need to get up, kind of like clear your head a little bit, and then come back and look at your animation. And then you may find, yeah, that looks horrible. The bounces don't look right, the squashing doesn't look right, whatever it is, okay? But that looks pretty cool. All right, so I'm happy with that. I'll make that a little bigger. All right, so I'm going to take that cube, I'm going to throw him on a layer, and then I'm going to hide it. So these work a lot better than Cinema's. And again, I said this in the last class, I'm just comparing it to Cinema's just so you have some point of reference. I'm going to click my object. Over here in the layers, I'm going to click on that far right button, okay? And what that does is it creates a new layer and automatically assigns that item to the layer. So if I had 50 items on here, it would automatically assign 50 items to it. I don't have to go into my objects and actually like assign that layer to it. So I'm just going to call this, I just double click the layer and say topple box. That sounds like a cool name, right? Topple box. Okay. The V here stands for visibility. So we just check that off and it goes away. Okay. So now we have that gone. So now let's create another cube. And this will be cube number 2. What do we do before we do anything? Raise it up. How much? 0.5. Okay. Now let's work our OCD in here. Does it bother anyone else that there says 0.5 right in there? Probably not. A little bit. All right. We're not going to lose sleep over it. Maybe. So what I want to do is I want to eliminate that. Yes, ma'am. Create polygon cube. I don't want that translate Y to say 0.5. Yes, sir. And it's still there. Right click on your layer and then say assign material or item or add item to selected layer or something like that. There you go. So you must not have had it selected when you originally created it. All right, so we made a new cube. We raised it up to 0.5. I got distracted. What we want to do is get rid of that translate Y as 0.5. I want like fresh. I want to start off right at the beginning where this thing is like right there at zeros, okay? That's where freeze transform comes in. So we just click freeze transform, and now our cube is sitting right there on the ground. Everything is zeroed out in 1. It's perfect. Okay. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do a little squash and stretch on this. So let's jump over here. Squash and stretch. The 12 principles of animation. You guys have had After Effects class before. You're familiar with the 12 principles of animation? Anyone not familiar with them? Okay. You've seen them before. You have not had After Effects?
I had After Effects, but I don't remember them.
Yeah. That was a long time ago.
Your motion graphics class after
You do, right. That's right. We're watching this again, so you're there. Oh, that's 20 minutes. We're not watching that one. Watch this one.
Hey guys, so I decided to make a...
So we're going to squash this cube. We're also going to stretch this cube. So we're going to duplicate him with Control D, and we will make a buddy right next to it. So whichever direction you want to go with this buddy, you can just scoot that over. Okay, so I just have 2 cubes. One's on one side, one's on the other side. So this one here we're going to squash, and then the other one we will stretch. Okay, and we're just going to go from this spot to squash it or stretch it. So first thing we want to do before we set any keyframes is just kind of test it out. See what it's going to look like. Okay, so if I were to squash this and I do this, what happens? It doesn't stretch, right? So it should kind of go out like that too, right? So that's more of a squash. What else happened to like the bottom of this? It rose up. Yep. So one way that we could circumvent this or fix it is to also animate the translate Y scooting itself down. That's like crazy to do. You have a question or you just have your hand up? Okay. That's one way we could do it, is translating the Y down as this thing stretches, but that's kind of like a weird way to do it. What else might we be able to do? Yep. So we can move the pivot point straight to the bottom, and now when it scales, instead of it scaling this way, it'll just scale that way. Okay? So what was the anchor point hotkey? Yep. And then what was a snapping one? V. Before we get too far, we are not going to snap it to the same spot. Okay? If we snap it to the same spot, as it stretches outward, it's going to stretch from that corner and just go that way. And so that's going to look weird, right? So we want to make sure that this stays centered right here, but still at the bottom. So what we do, still DV, but all we do now is instead of grabbing this thing or the middle, we just grab the arrow and just drag the arrow straight to the bottom. Okay? And that will snap it right to the bottom of that. DV and then grab the green arrow and push it down.
Like when I was in the middle, you were in the middle of that,
I saw it crashed. Okay, we have the other cube too, probably do the same thing, right? While we're in the mode, let's move that one to the bottom also. Okay. Now, V is snap to point. There are no points right in the middle of this cube, but it's a smart enough tool that it recognizes there's points over here, so that's what it aligns it with, okay? Some of the other snapping tools are not as smart, and they don't do that. All right, so now if I were to push this down, pull that out, success. That's what we wanted. Okay. Now, we need to consider a couple things. It's not going to look right. It'll look right at first, then I'll show you that it's wrong, and then we'll fix it so that it is right. Okay. So first thing we do when we set keyframes, we go back to the start of our animation where we're going to start setting keyframes. So jump over to frame 1. We're going to set scale keyframes. Okay, which ones are we scaling? No. Which directions? We have 3 scales. Do we need all 3? So we need that one, Y and Z, okay? So let's scale those. So instead of us doing the right clicking, okay, remember I said you can highlight these, you can right click, you can say key selected. That's too many clicks for me, okay? I want to be able to keep these things highlighted and just hit a key on the keyboard, and that will be my keyframes for those. I'm going to go to the animation menu, so you change this modeling mode to animation mode. And I'm going to go to key, set key, option box. Okay, very top. So when you set a key, this is the command that gets run. So instead of setting keys for everything, which is what the default settings are set to, I'm going to say do only the all keyable attributes from channel box. Okay, so if I check all keyable attributes from channel box, that means whatever I have highlighted, those two scales, it will automatically just set keyframes on those because I have those two selected. If I don't have anything selected, it sets it on everything, so I have to be careful. But as long as I have those selected and I hit S, I'm good. So I'm going to hit set a key. Okay. So there's the start point. It's right there. We figured out in the last one that for the box to go like this, it was about 13 frames for a good amount, right? So let's do kind of the same thing. Let's go to 13, and let's just scale this down and scale that out. Okay, how do we know how far to squish it down and how far to push it out? That's a good estimate. The answer is we don't actually know. We just do what looks good. Okay, so if something looks off, then we know it's off, right? If you want to do it mathematically, I'm sure someone out there has actually written a script that will actually take the volume of the initial cube, the volume of the last cube, and try to figure out what the in-between should be. But realistically, we just kind of look at it and see what's going to look good. You'll see that one of the 12 principles of animation is exaggeration. So sometimes we actually want it to kind of squish and stretch a little bit further than we would otherwise. Okay? All right. So now we have some basic things set up. We need to fix this, right? So that we get a little bit more oomph to them, because right now they're just kind of like easing in, easing out kind of thing. We have to kind of consider the dynamics of how things move, and that will give us a really good indicator as to how things should work. So in that video, when he was talking about the ball hitting the ground, okay, with easy ease, you know, it doesn't like slowly hit the ground. Why doesn't it slowly hit the ground? Gravity. The ball doesn't know that the ground is there. It's just going to keep falling until something hits it, right? So the same thing here. What would cause it to go in and what would cause it to go out? In this case, it probably should have some easing on both ends, okay? Unless there's something like hitting it or whatever, there should have some easing both ways. But maybe we want it to just be a little bit more extreme, easing in and easing out, so it has more of like an impact to it, versus this, which is kind of like soft ease and soft ease out, okay? So let's jump back to the graph editor. I think our timing is good. Where we have our keyframes, we just need to adjust the other stuff.
Do I grab both of them or
Just the one.
okay.
Yeah.
So I made one stretch too. So.
Yeah, that's what we did. We're all on the same page. Okay, so if we look here, I have a couple things going on. This SDY, SDZ, I'm going to delete this. I don't know if you have those, you can delete those too. I don't know why those showed up. I think it's like the soft selection. We can just delete that. Okay. And then we have this, which is our two graphs. Now this is where it gets tricky because we have to kind of figure out what's actually happening here because they're both like stretching. One's going up, one's going down. Realistically, it doesn't matter. All we need to do is enhance this here and that there. I want this to basically be, you have that memorized already. I want this to be like this, like that. So very, really sharp kind of turn, so that we have a little bit of motion on each side of it, or a little bit, and then right in the middle we have a lot. So it's kind of like, and then it kind of slows down. All right, so I'm going to grab both of these. If you were in Illustrator, you can grab handlebars and you can stretch those handlebars as far as you want. In Maya, you can't do that right off the bat. You have to set some options and then it works, okay? So I'm going to grab both curves. I'm going to go up to my curves here and say weighted tangents. Okay, that's one thing. I have to do one more thing. That changes them to these kind of longer handlebars. I'm going to go to then tangents and say free tangent length. And that means that they can then stretch out further. So now if I were to grab this handlebar and middle drag, whoopsie, make sure I'm in the move tool. That goes there. That goes there. There. Okay. So now I've really elongated this, so we have a pretty smooth area here, speeds up, and then we have a smooth area at the end of this. This might look like garbage, but we'll just see. No, I did. You really don't need to. You can really kind of just see which one's going to make it look good. You have to make sure you grab the graph. If I just click, okay, so if I just click on this, I'm still selected on the cube. I have to make sure I click the curves and then delete them. Weighted tangents, free tangent lengths. So that hotkey there, free tangent lengths and all that, that might be a good one to add to your shelf. Like, you know, I constantly am hitting these two buttons every time I go in there. Cool. It working? Good. All right. It's 6:40. Let's take like a 10-minute break. Use the bathroom, get a drink of water, whatever you need to. Come back at 6:50. We'll be here for another like 40 minutes after that, 30 minutes after that. All right. So we have our, everyone's back. Yes, yes. All right. We have our animation stuff here. They squash, whoop, like that. Yep. So now let's jump over. All right, so how do we add anticipation to these two?
By making the bug squash in one stretch.
Yeah, right? So if we just take the animation we have here, right? They're going in this direction. We want them to go in the basically the opposite direction before they do that, right? So before this one here squashes down, it should probably like stretch up a little bit and then squash down, right? That's the anticipation. Same thing on the other side. Before it stretches up, we want to have it squash a little bit and then stretch up, okay? So how do we add frames before this? What was that? We do. What did you say? Set time now. We just move our time. Just move the animation over, right? We just adjust it. We take this animation, we scoot it down. Think of After Effects. We have our animation on a layer. We can just grab the keyframes and just scoot everything down, okay? And again, that's where the dope sheet is like super awesome, because I can grab both of these items, go to my dope sheet, and then just scoot the stuff down. Now, how far? I don't know yet. I'll move it to like 15, figure out where it looks good, and then I'll tweak it from there, okay? So I just grabbed all of those keyframes, middle drug it over to 15, and then I'll tweak it after that.
So it starts at 15?
Yeah, so it's going to start at 15. It shouldn't be that long. I shouldn't have 15 frames of anticipation. That would be weird. My anticipation is longer than something that actually happens. All right, so we'll just leave that there. All right, so probably about 10, that might be like a good spot to start it. We may jump back to the dope sheet and start tweaking stuff. Now, I can't have this, let's start with just one. We'll just focus on one at a time. I can't.
Are we
Yes, sir.
moving our current animation to the start of it being at frame 15?
Correct.
Okay.
Middle mouse button with the move tool selected. W. Good. Cool. It will get you over and over again. You can. You can actually go negative time and do stuff there. Yep. That's helpful because sometimes what would happen, I have a character that animates from frame 0, let's say, or 1 to 500. I have a cloth that I want to fit onto them, but I don't want to screw up the animation. So I will actually go into the negative numbers, make sure the cloth fits, and that way when the animation starts at frame 1, their cloth is all ready to go. Okay? So yes, you can go backwards, and when you render that out, it turns into a huge thing, but we won't be there. Okay, so at frame 10, I can't just stretch this out, okay? This is the one that squishes, yes, okay. So I can't go to frame 10 and just squish this out, because what's going to happen is it's going to start off that way and then come back down and squish. What I need to do is keep it as a cube, stretch it up, and then have it squish, okay? So I'm not going to go to 10, I'm going to go to, let's say, 8. I think that might be a good number. Okay, so I'm going to go to frame 8, set it at 1 so it's still a cube. Then go to, let's say, frame 11 and squish it in just a little, or stretch it out just a little bit.
My dope sheet lost all the text. It's just straight line.
Hit F or zoom out. Right, so that doesn't look like fluid at all. The reason that it looks horrible is because we didn't really set it up to have or to anticipate anticipation. We told it basically to be really slow at the beginning of this. We don't want it to be slow now because we have this middle part. We're fine with it being slow like right here at the very beginning, but that middle part, that should be a little bit more fluid. It should go basically from being a square to kind of slowly coming up and then fast transition right from one spot to the other. Now what we could do is a couple things. So I'll try a couple things and we'll see what happens. Number one, let's look at the curve. So it starts off slow here, it picks up speed, and then it slows down again to get to that. That's fine. Here, because of what we did with these handlebars, that's like way too tight, and so we're getting this like weird look. We need this keyframe though, or do we need that keyframe? No, we don't. We don't need that keyframe there. We probably could delete that keyframe, and then that would fix everything. And if we hit play, there we go. It's a bit better. Maybe now I can take this and, oops, grab this side and stretch that out, and then grab this side. There we go. So just deleting that keyframe, that extra one, is an easy solution. Right? Maybe tweaking the graph a little bit further. Now the reason that that works is because that middle keyframe we no longer need, because originally we had it there to hold the shape, but now we're going from one pose to the next pose to the next pose. There's nothing wrong with trying stuff out and seeing what's going to look good. So in this case, these are eased in at the very beginning. They're eased out here. They're eased out there. So there's nothing wrong with me just going in here and just resetting these. So if I click this flat, this just resets the whole thing. So I could look at it and say, you know, how does this look? Maybe I want to tweak it from here, kind of resetting its position. Maybe I want to leave it the way it was. I think the way it was pretty good. All right, so I'm just going to do this other one real quick. I'm going to go to frame 8. I'm going to set a key on those. Go to 12. And then I'm going to delete this one at 15. There we go. Okay, so now we have our stuff. Cool. Oops. Okay, so now we sort of kind of have it. It's not perfect, but good enough for what we're doing. So now switch back to your perspective view. You can get that by either clicking the perspective here, holding the space bar, holding on Maya and going to perspective, or tapping the space bar and then getting into it. Okay? And then you tell me what is wrong with our animation.
It's only squashing out on one plane.
Correct. We have a cube, but it's not squashing the other two directions, right? So what two directions would be tied together? No, it's three of them.
Oh, two things you can tie together. Z and X.
Z and X, right? So they're going to squish this way and squash that way, all kind of together. So what we're going to do is we'll rewind all the way to the beginning. We'll do one box at a time. I'm just going to right-click on Scale Z and say Copy. Right-click on Scale X and say Paste. That didn't work at all. What did it do? That should have worked. Oh, sorry. Nope, I messed up. Hold on. I cannot paste it right at the beginning. I have to go to the first keyframe and then paste. That's what I did wrong. So I will go to frame 8 and then paste that, and then it'll work. Right, copy it at the first frame and paste it at the first frame. Otherwise, it's kind of like resetting itself.
Do I click on Scale Z and then
It doesn't matter which frame you copy it at. You just have to make sure you paste it at that frame. Yep. So copy it first and then paste it. Yep. That should have worked there. What is it doing? Nope, mine's not working either. They must have changed something, because that shouldn't be doing that. I don't know why it's doing that. Let's delete that again. Let's try this again. There it goes. Okay, you may have to right-click on that, delete it, and then do it again. Like, I don't know why it didn't work the first time. It did something weird. Apparently. Yep, do them from both. Now the cool thing about that is that we didn't have to deal with the other graph while we were working. So inside of our graph editor, we have scale X, scale Y, and then scale Z, which is matched up to scale X. They're both on the same graph right now. So if we were to grab this and grab this, we're tweaking both at the same time, but it's very easy also to accidentally grab just one and tweak just one of those. Okay? So typically when you get more comfortable with it, it won't be an issue, but just something to kind of keep your eye out for. Okay? Just to kind of show you some other stuff that Maya can do, I'm going to delete these scale X's here. You keep yours. I'm just going to delete mine. I'm going to use this node editor. As an animator / rigger, sometimes you want to use like the most efficient way to do something. So instead of me having to worry about the scale X and the scale Z as two separate items, I know pretty much forever for this, those are always going to be tied together. So what happens if I make a change to Z? Now I have to go back and delete X and then copy it or make sure that those two are linked. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to open this up. And what this allows me to do is I can actually take one attribute, so the rotate Z, and I can connect it to rotate X. Okay? Now that's kind of like a weird way to do it, but it works. So now what should happen is if I click on this, oops, I meant scale. Why did anyone stop me? Just let me make a fool of myself. There we go. All right, let's try that again. All right, so now it works perfectly. Okay. And now if I were to go and change Z at all, X automatically updates. Okay. You could also tie this into another area where you could say, anytime I scale Y inward, I want Z and X to scale outward. You can write expressions. You can do kind of like little controls like this that allow you to do that. Yes, sir.
I'm trying to copy my, I'm trying to like do the full scale X thing, and when I do it, it just makes more keyframes.
Okay, you may have to right-click on your scale and delete it, and then repaste it. But make sure you paste it at the same starting frame. All right, so I'm going to try this one. Whoopsie. Grab that out. There it is.
Just got rid of it entirely.
All right, I'll be over there to check it out in a sec. There we go. Sweet. Okay. Now the node editor allows you to adjust, like connect anything to anything, which is really powerful. You can literally connect something like, remember at the beginning I said we could, if we scaled it in Y, we could have the translate Y like scoot down. So I could attach these two things together. So every time this scaled, the Y would move down so far or move up so far. And you could also add other stuff to this. This gets really crazy. You have to find where that went. Tabs, create tab, no, not create tab. Where's my create window? Bookmark, there. Tabs, no, no. Hold on, my screen may just be shrinking it so I can't see it. Toggle snapping, no. Do not graph, display. There it is. That's why it was off. Utilities, there we go. Okay, so inside here there are things like multiply, where I could take the scale Z of this, put it into here, take the output Z, put it into, let's take this into the translate Y. This is just going to do something weird. I don't know what it's going to do. Yes, we'll see what happens. So as it scales in Z, it's also moving it up twice the amount. So I set that to 20. So you can see how now it's like moving up and down as it's scaling in Z. Okay, now you you do this to a bunch of objects and you get these really cool kind of like motion graphy kind of effects. All right, and then to get rid of that, I just click on this, right click, and then say break the connection. Reset that back to 0. And then we're back to where we were. Cool. All right, so I'm going to save this. I'm going to close my Maya. And then these are the things that you have to back up. So make sure you back them up. On your P drive, you have, I'm going to documents because that's where they are on my computer. It's on your P drive. You have a Maya folder, you have a 2018, you need to back that folder up. That's your folder that has all your preferences in it. On your P drive, you have your 2540 folder. You need to back that up as well. But make sure you've closed Maya down first, and then you'll be fine, okay? Otherwise, your preferences won't go, and it won't let you do that. Your thumb drive, your hard drive, your Dropbox.